if there is an oppressed party in a relationship, whoever that party is, this relationship is not a beautiful relationship. It is not a human relationship. We as people are not. We want them to establish a relationship based on friendship, negotiation, consultation, and love. There are situations where men and women are equal. There are situations where men and women are different. These equal situations are not considered at all. Just consider the fact that men get a little more when they inherit as girls and boys as evidence that God created men as the superior sex. In other words, we do not want to live in a constant oppressive relationship with men. We want to be friends. We want to be friends. We also want to see love and compassion from them.
Hello everyone from Istanbul School. Dear audience, today we will talk about Islamic feminism. We will talk about the demands and origins of Islamic feminism. Our guest is Dr. Hidayet Şefkatli Tuksal. Welcome, teacher. How are you?
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm fine. Thank you.
Hoja, we call it Islamic feminism. It is also your field of study. In fact, let me show you a book of yours. As you mentioned in your book, your field of study here is actually the traces of anti-women discourse in Islamic tradition. We would like to talk about this issue with you today in this program. First of all, what is Islamic feminism? What is its origin? How did it start? How do you interpret it?
So there was an Islamic feminism before it was called Islamic feminism. So when Muslim women or Muslim men who think about Muslim women become aware of the issue of women's rights, and when these things that are said, claimed, and demanded in the world about women's rights come to the agenda somehow, how do these demands reconcile with the Muslim identity? Are these demands justified, etc.? And so on. Such a field of discussion has begun. Let's say that, for example, I see some of the objections that Hajj's eyes made in the past, some of the positions she took as very feminist positions. But of course, let's not be anachronistic. There was no such thing as feminism in those days. But after feminism emerged, after the first wave emerged, the Ottoman women's movement became interested in feminism as religious women or as Muslim women, or the women in Egypt became interested in feminism as Muslim women. There was a mixture of, generally it is looked at like this, oh my God, how can feminism and Islam be compatible? It is an oxymoron, and so on. There is no such thing, because feminism is a wide spectrum. When it first emerged in the West, there were many conversations based on religion. In other words, by rejecting religion, ignoring religion, women did not talk about feminism. Therefore, in Turkey, that is, in the Ottoman or Muslim geography, when women talked about the issue of women's rights without ignoring religion, without rejecting the legitimating power of religion, Islamic feminism emerged. We can say that.
Well, here they bring to the forefront the issues that Islam and feminism diverge on, which they call oxymoron and cannot reconcile. What are these? Why can't people bring Islam and feminism together?
Because they think that Islam has provisions that are not open to interpretation in any way, especially in the relations between men and women, which are in the status of NAS. This understanding, according to this understanding, that is Allah, He created men as a superior gender. In fact, our commentators immediately start with verses about women in their interpretations. Men are superior to women in this, that, these aspects. You know, before feminism emerged, there was already a masculinism that prevailed. I mean, even the fact that a man can have 4 wives is something that shows that women are superior to men.
In fact, about a quarter of it.
Yes, this is in many of our interpretations. After all, this type, that is, constantly comparing women and men and constantly showing women their place, but this place is always in line with the man's desire and there is no limit to it. So something like this. What will a woman who is raised with such an understanding think, for example? Here, a woman prays 5 times a day. If she gets her husband's approval, she will go to heaven. What is this? It is a religious life that is indexed to the husband. In other words, you have no religious responsibility other than praying 5 times a day. Other than that, you will spend your whole life trying to please your husband. In the definitions of marriage, the wife is expected to obey her husband in such a way that, of course, some limits are set, but the fiqh is broader. But when we look at the public discourses, sermons, and the advice of our famous scholars on the management of the house between men and women, your husband, let's say your father lives upstairs. He is sick. You're going to visit him. If your husband doesn't give permission, you can't go, for example. It is so narrowed and compressed and no room for movement is left for women. There is such a definition. Is real life like this? Of course not. I mean, not everything is so tight in real life, but even today, women grow up listening to a lot of sermons, so they think that obedience to the husband, they perceive it as such a religious commandment. I even went to a funeral recently. The man was older than the woman. He had Alzheimer's. Because he had Alzheimer's, he had a lot of ridiculous demands and requests. She tried to fulfill them just to avoid going beyond the husband's consent. She even tried to fulfill them. Can you imagine?
Terrible.
Yes, he is. So he doesn't say this man is not in his right mind. He doesn't say, what am I doing? He even tries to do those things so that he can go to heaven. After all, of course, this is not a humanitarian thing. This is not normal. In the end, when Islamic feminism was emerging, it was more like the first wave of feminism, more about women's right to work. Can women work in Islam? Yes, they can work because in the time of the Prophet there were women working or their wives were working, especially Prophet Khadijah. Or do women have the right to education? Yes, because the Prophet ﷺ encouraged everyone, men and women, to learn to read and write. He said, even if it is in knowledge, go and get it, and so on. Or, I don't know, property rights. Women have the right to property in Islam. After all, inheritance is shared here, but there are situations where men and women are equal, and there are situations where men and women are different. These equal situations are not looked at all. The only thing that is done is that when they inherit as male and female children, for example, men get a little more. It is perceived as evidence of male superiority that Allah created men as the superior sex.
However, there is a different distinction there too. Yes, men are given a larger share, but they are also given the responsibility of taking care of their families. The small share given to women is entirely theirs.
Yes, that is why it could not be implemented. So just because there is this sharing in the Holy Qur'an, did our Muslims implement it in this way? No, they didn't. There is an anthropologist named Germaine Tilliot. There are more such relations with the Berber tribes of Algeria. So these Berber tribes are more Sufi, maybe a group like the Alawites. The others are a more Sunni group. He looked at this. How do women live here? In Berber groups, women are given inheritance rights. And there, women's ownership of property arising from these inheritance rights and the relations between men and women in general are much more in favor of women. But in these economic groups, neither inheritance is given nor women have any other rights. And German Thilo was saying that even in this way, the fact that it gave women inheritance rights, if the Muslim countries had actually made it work even in this way, the life of women would have been very changed, but they never implemented it. My family is immigrant. My mother's side is Albanian. Albanians never give inheritance to girls. A daughter who asks for her share of the inheritance is rejected. and they are not negotiated with. I look at my Black Sea friends. There is a moral pressure on girls. That is, so that she willingly transfers her rights to her brothers. I look at my friends from the East. There is none.
In fact, it doesn't even have a name there.
Yes, in the Aegean, Mediterranean, and Central Anatolia, in my opinion, inheritance is given to girls in regions where older Turkish things are dominant, but there too it is not given equally to boys. While the parents are still alive, many calculations are made on how these properties can be stolen from girls. After all, in other words, if even a right clearly given by Allah is abused in this way, it means that women have a lot of work to do. And these are already being discussed, these rights are being sought. In other words, Islamic feminism includes sensible women and men. In other words, men are also involved in this business. Everyone sees that it is not humane for an ummah or a species of humanity to be dominated by another species. In other words, domination in human relations is a faulty thing. The relationship between women and men should be a relationship of friendship, a relationship of solidarity, a relationship of consultation. This is what Islamic feminists say anyway. They want it.
So what do we see in Turkey in the name of Islamic feminism? What is its social equivalent?
Let me put it this way. It didn't have much of an equivalent until the 80s. Because the Islamic segments were struggling to exist. But after the 80s, as schools that girls can go to, Imam Hatip high schools were opened, as girls were educated, as they went to universities from there, as they gained a profession. Something changed. Actually, there is also this. When I was a student in the 80s, this discourse was always dominant. Yes, girls should go to university, but they should go to be educated mothers, not to go to be working women. In other words, our women's work is at home. They should take care of their children, but they should be educated women, because men had started to go to university. They wanted educated wives upon their demands. Let's say that a little bit. But of course, when the genie is out of the bottle, everything changes. Yes, women may have come to be educated mothers, but women who enter the workforce see that, okay, I do this too. I mean, why would I do someone for someone? Okay, she gets support from her mother. Maybe she gets support from, I don't know, some assistants, other women, but she carries out these tasks. In fact, women's work has doubled. That's it too. But still, being a professional woman, no matter what the Islamic community says about this issue, it has always been a prestigious thing. In other words, even if the discourse is different, it has always respected women who have a profession. Therefore, as women who have a profession increase, the issue of rights became something women thought about more. And in Turkey, after the 1980s, these feminist women struggle against beatings at work, their problem with domestic violence, etc., somehow came to the ears of religious women. We founded the Capital Women Platform in Ankara in 1995. That happened when religious women in Istanbul encouraged us after attending the World Women's Conference in Beijing. When they attended that World Women's Conference, they had listened to and seen the problems of all women in the world. They were already our friends who were experienced in civil society. Anyway, they said, let's strengthen civil society work in Turkey. In this way, we started to come together with feminist women in many meetings. In this way, we actually became familiar with the discourse of women's rights, and we realized that as religious women, there was no problem in defending these rights. In other words, after the 80s, our lives came to the agenda in this way.
What kind of difficulties did you encounter? Actually, you mentioned it here at some point. But what was the biggest problem, for example? Being both Muslim and a feminist should have a big response in this society. Yes, we say we are in a modern society, we see it that way, but fundamentally we have traditions and cultural influences that we are much more attached to. What do you think was the biggest problem we encountered here?
Well, in our personal story, we were not yet feminists, because we did not know much about feminist issues. In fact, we always said that we were not feminists on many issues. But we were educated women. Most of us were theologians. As women theologians, we entered the kitchen of religion. So how are these rulings that come before us produced? There is such a divine, such a human touch here. As we saw these and started discussing them, we were already labeled as feminists without ever calling ourselves feminists. And we understood that the moment you open your mouth to say K, you are already a feminist. So there is no escape from this. After that, when I started talking about women's rights and such in these programs on TV, something like this happened. I didn't reject it anymore after that. It was like this anyway. You go on a program. Oh, are you a feminist? That's the first question. So I was saying, yes, I'm a feminist, and we were going on like that, but it's like, you're a lesbian, like, you have no morals. It's like the worst imaginable. I mean, when I say the worst, I mean that feminism is something that is lined up behind a lot of things that are bad for some people. But in its most basic meaning, it is an idea that disturbs the comfort of men. That's the whole point. Comfort is disturbed.
This is what they fear the most, disruption of their comfort. That is why they continued their reactions by insisting on rejecting and opposing. Speaking of television, I would like to ask about the reflections in the media. How was the media reflection of this Islamic feminism, and how was its reflection in the media reflected in society? How do you see this?
Different things happened at different times. In the ATS, in other words, the secular media welcomed such discussions more warmly, while our religious media was very much against them. But religious women were actually fighting on two fronts. On the one hand, they were fighting with their own section, their own neighborhood. On the other hand, we were at war with the secular neighborhood because some of my feminist friends thought that religious women were in no way like our religious women, that they were something oxymoron, that a religious woman could not be a women's rights defender. In other words, they thought that the only thing religious women defended was the headscarf. But over time we held meetings together, and in the early days of the AK Party, when the goal of joining the European Union was a very strong goal and civil society was very vibrant, there were a lot of meetings, and it was always, what do we need to fix? What do we need to fix in order to become a country that is more free, more egalitarian, more in line with the norms of the European Union? The issue of women was one of them. We attended so many meetings in Turkey, in Europe, in America, in South Africa, in other words. We went to many countries in the world. As a result, we met a lot of people. We saw that there are different feminisms. So we, Islamic feminists, without giving up religion, without giving up being religious, women and men, we are not actually trying to improve the lives of women only. In other words, we are trying to make women and men live better lives. Because if there is an oppressed party in a relationship, no matter who it is, this relationship is not a good relationship. It is not a humane relationship. We want people to establish a relationship based on nonviolence, friendship, negotiation, consultation, and love. This is our concern and our effort.
So, when we look at the future, what kind of effort should be made? What kind of change should be implemented under the umbrella of Islamic feminism? How do you see this picture right now?
There is also something like this. Women are also used to struggle. I mean, there are actually very serious attacks. I mean, we look at people's one sentence, an article written, or the way they sit. Immediately a great lynch culture starts. Lynch attacks start because now there is an area called social media, and some aggressive types use these as an excuse and attack. But maybe we have gotten used to these kinds of attacks, and so, for example, right now Kadam is being attacked the most. I mean, even though it is an association founded by religious women and it is close to the government, if they have a line that opposes their demands, they are under tremendous attack. We are already being attacked. We are used to this without being discouraged by attacks. And I want to say this specifically. No feminist embraces feminism with the aim of dominating someone else. The fundamental consensus of the ideology of feminism, whatever its form, is to create a world where no one dominates anyone else. In other words, relationships should be non-violent. People freely realize themselves in their only life on earth. How realistic or healthy are the thoughts, traditions, or things that restrict these freedoms or create hierarchies between people? Who benefits from it? When we look at it from a social perspective, does it really help us to be a healthy society? Does it not? They discuss these. Are there any feminist views that I can agree with? There are views that I cannot agree with at all. Therefore, we, Muslim feminists, religious feminists, are divided among ourselves. For example, I am currently a more traditional religious feminist. There are more modern religious feminists. Ultimately, we are trying to make the world a better place to live, a better place for our children, for women, for men, for the ages, for the disabled, a place where we live with better memories. So they need to understand that. We are not man-haters. We have sons, husbands, fathers, but we don't want to live in a constant relationship of oppression with men. We want to be friends, we want to be friends. We also want to receive love and compassion from them. That is why we continue to struggle.
Yes, let's say it again. Islamic feminists are not man-haters. Let's spread the word hoja, because that's exactly what it looks like. We don't want to kill men. We don't have such a goal, but we also don't want to live in a world where we dominate each other. Of course, feminists don't want to dominate men either, but they want to destroy this order that men have established. I hope they will succeed. Thank you very much for your valuable comments.
I thank you. Maybe I'll do something like this. There are those who want to destroy the order established by men. There are those who want to transform the order established by men. So this is where we differ.
Yes, we are separated now too. I wanted to destroy, you want to transform.
Of course. Yes, when we demolish it, we can get a little bit trapped under it. That's why we prefer to transform it.
That's okay too, teacher. Let's transform it. We definitely want something different in some way, but yes, thank you very much again.
I thank you.
Dear viewers, we talked about Islamic feminism today. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.